churches today, for the most part, are what? Tax-exempt charitable organizations. Tax exemption presupposes that which you can pay taxes in. And it presupposes that that is money. Whether we want to say it this way or not, churches are set up to believe without question that fiat money is money. Churches today presuppose statism in their understanding of money. Bible and Bitcoin podcast is sponsored by Bitcoin Well. Bitcoin Well is a Bitcoin-only exchange. It's non-custodial, so you don't have to trust them with your Bitcoin. It's feature-rich and always improving. They have a Christian CEO and are an all-around amazing place to get your Bitcoin. To get started, go to bitcoinwell.com/pastorcoin and start stacking today. Welcome to the Bible and Bitcoin podcast. I am your host, Alin Armstrong, aka Pastor Coin, and today we're talking about the elephants in the church. I was born again on January 20th, 2008, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I was actually in the back seat of my dad's Pontiac Vibe on the way to a church service. Now, there was nothing particularly special about this Sunday, but suddenly I felt something in my body shift. It was as if God downloaded the truth into my spirit, and this is the truth. Simply this: Jesus is the answer. 4 words. Jesus is the answer. And suddenly, I'm not exaggerating, everything became more real. It was as if I was looking at the world with a gray filter on, and now I could see the colors for what they were. So an excitement and an electricity actually flowed through me. And as soon as we got to the church, I literally, I'm not exaggerating, ran down the aisle of that church to the front to get baptized. I didn't grow up in church, so this stuff was all new to me. And I learned a lot and I grew a lot in the following years. And I eventually got the call to pastoral ministry, and I began my training. I went to a seminary and I learned a lot about all the stuff you learn at seminary: Christology, systematic theology, eschatology, and all the ologies. But the one thing we never learned was a biblical framework for, you guessed it, economics. Don't misunderstand me. I heard plenty of sermons about money, but never one that dealt with the fundamental question of what is money. Now, this was taken for granted. Money is what you put in the offering plate. Money is what you earn at your job. Dollars are money. But as I think about and reflect back on my training for ministry, the fundamental underlying assumption was, or is, money is what the government says it is. Now, the seminary wouldn't say it that way, but that's how they operated on a fundamental level. Now, you might be thinking, Alan, what are you talking about? How can you say that? Think about it. Churches today, for the most part, are what? Tax-exempt charitable organizations. Tax exemption presupposes that which you can pay taxes in. And it presupposes that that is money. Whether we want to say it this way or not, churches are set up to believe without question that fiat money is money. Churches today presuppose statism in their understanding of money. Money is a government and state decreed unit of account and measurement of value. Collectively, we have not stopped to ask, is the system that gives us fiat money moral and good? We talked about this in episode 1. Now, I remember years ago when I was beginning to ask questions like this and feeling alone and alienated from many of my brethren as a result, there was one night after a prayer meeting and Bible study, I was talking with a brother and said, I think fiat money might be inherently sinful. An uncomfortable grin appeared on his face and he let out a nervous laugh and said, "You can't say that money is sinful." So I tried to help him understand, no, I'm not saying that money as a principle is sinful. I'm saying that fiat money is. They print money. Banks don't really have the money they say they do. They give loans and mortgages to people with money they just create, and you have to pay it with interest. How is that not fraud? How is that not counterfeiting? And on I went, and this nervous grin turned to anger and offense. To be honest, I was kind of taken aback by the whole thing. Why was this Christian so married to fiat money? I couldn't understand. It was like I insulted his mother or something. The more I learned, the more certain Christians became uncomfortable around me. And it was a strange thing. It wasn't until I finally realized the issue of fiat money is the elephant in the modern Western church that it all began to make sense. There's this massive stinking elephant in the church, and we'd rather just pretend it's not there than deal with it and the implications of it. Look, fiat money is a huge moral issue and problem, and I have been involved in anti-abortion ministry for a long time. And it is analogous to that issue in many ways. I suppose we have a few elephants in the church now that I think about it: abortion, fiat money, so forth. Certain Christians would treat me the same way when I would bring up abortion. It was awkward for them. They would say things like, "Can't we just focus on the gospel?" And things like, "Let's just love people instead." In other words, I know there's a massive elephant here pooping all over the sanctuary, but can we just ignore it, please? God says in Deuteronomy 25:13-16, we read this in the last episode, the first episode, and it bears repeating, "You shall not have in your bag two kinds of weights, a large and a small. You shall not have in your house two kinds of measures, a large and a small. A full and fair weight you shall have, a full and fair measure you shall have, that your days may be long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. For all who do such things, all who act dishonestly, are an abomination to the Lord your God." As Christians, we all know we should be honest in how we use money, but did you know the scripture also gives us guidance in what an honest money is? It must be a full and fair weight. That means the money itself must be free from manipulation and fraud. Fiat money is a system of fraud and theft. It is a monetary network wherein governments decree value into existence and are able to tilt the scales in any way they want. They control the supply of money, who gets to create the money, and all the regulatory boundaries in that system. The bank is legally allowed to create money they don't have and lend it to you at interest. How is this honest? How is this just? God tells us this is an abomination. It is evil. It is theft. It is fraud. How can we as God's people say we are a people of honesty while we prop up a fraudulent, dishonest system? We do well to call it out. We do well to call out all manner of evil in our society. We condemn the abortionists for murder, and rightly so. We stand against the LGBTQ alphabet whatever, and rightfully so. We reject wokeism and identity politics, and rightfully so. But to the central banker who's robbing the whole population, who's robbing our neighbor of his labor and his time and his energy, we wink and we turn the other way. I wrote The Bible and Bitcoin for you, Bible-believing Christian, and in it I lay out the biblical basis for what money is, why our current fiat monetary system is ungodly, and how Bitcoin is the best and most viable, biblically compliant replacement for government fiat money. There's even a small group study guide in the back with additional resources to study with your church small group. Get it on Amazon or pay with Bitcoin at thebibleandbitcoin.com for a discount. When will the church wake up to the systemic evil of central banking and the fiat fraud Ponzi? Now, I know some of you may be listening and thinking, what are you saying? What are we supposed to do? What money do we use? Are you saying don't use money? No, not necessarily. The government has this sin in the scenario here. The oppressor is in sin, not the oppressed. We are forced to use this fake fraud money. What I am suggesting is we begin to call it for what it is, fraud that hurts our neighbors. Believe it or not, this is a love your neighbor issue. And I asked myself many years ago, is this fiat monetary system loving my neighbor? And the answer is no, it is not. Perhaps years ago this would have sounded silly to say, but not so much anymore. I can remember warning people in 2020 that shutting down the economy and printing all the money that was printed was a bad idea that would hurt us in the future. And people laughed at me and scorned. But now look, people are hurting in the real world. Inflation is devastating individuals, businesses, families. Food bank usage is at all-time highs. People can't afford homes. There is real-world suffering happening as a result of the fiat Ponzi system and its ungodly policies. I remember talking with another Christian years ago and asking, is it loving to your future children and grandchildren to indebt them with crippling national debt that they will have to account for? Is that loving? Think about it. Proverbs 13:22 says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous. Now, granted, I believe this passage is speaking of spiritual inheritance, but it also applies here. The fiat monetary system, with its never-ending money printing and ballooning debt, flips this passage on its head. Instead of an inheritance, it leaves debts, slavery for future generations. Fiat 13:22 might read, a wicked man leaves crippling national debt to his children's children, and the wealth of the future is consumed today. And therein is the fundamental problem. We have a high time preference. We don't think about our children's children because fiat money does not incentivize us to think that far. Just kick the can down the road. Fiat money is Hezekiah money. King Hezekiah received a word from the prophet Isaiah that all that he has and all his fathers have stored up before him will be carried away to Babylon. To make matters worse, even his own sons would be taken into captivity as eunuchs. But this would all happen after Hezekiah dies. And what do you suppose Hezekiah did with this news? Did he lament? Did he cry out to God for mercy for his children? No, of course not. He said in 2 Kings 20:19, the word of the Lord that you have spoken is good. For he thought, why not, if there will be peace and security in my days? This is the spirit of fiat money. Oh, my children won't be able to afford a home. They will struggle with crippling debt in a crumbling society. The next generation will have to figure out how to clean up this monetary nightmare. Oh, well, so long as there is peace and prosperity in my days, it is good. Is that loving your neighbor? Of course not. There is an elephant in the church. Its name is fiat money, and it's time we stop ignoring it and begin, by God's grace, to figure this thing out. And thanks be to God, we have something like Bitcoin that we can peacefully opt into that is righteous in its policies and equal and fair. But we will never appreciate the solution if we close our eyes to the problem. I'll leave you with Proverbs 16:11. A just balance and scales are the Lord's. All the weights in the bag are his work. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Bible and Bitcoin podcast. Please like, share, subscribe, follow wherever you're watching or listening to this from. That would be greatly, greatly appreciated. Thanks so much, and God bless. Your family, your nation, and your world needs strong men. The devil wants men weak, emasculated, and addicted to porn. This is why I designed the Slaying the Beast course to help men take back the dominion porn stole from them. This course will help you discover your identity as God's image, how porn leverages and twists that against you, and how with God's help you can turn the tables on the beast and live free. There's also access to a Discord server where you can have fellowship with others in the fight. You do not have to wait any longer to conquer this beast once and for all. Go to lifegiverchurch.net to get started today.